What's good, YouTube? This is the Only Big Green Yugioh, and I'm back again with another deck profile. And this deck profile is going to be of a May 2002 deck, or otherwise known as Yu-Gi-Oh! Format deck. And it is of walls. This deck also goes by stall, deck out, or mill, so you might have heard the deck be called that. The main purpose of this deck, of course, is in its name. You're just setting a bunch of big defensive monsters like Giant Soldier Stone, for example, and your opponent is just overwhelmed. They're basically wasting their resources, which can open up a play late game to where you can swing in and kill them that way. Or, of course, by the other win con decking them out due to things like card destruction or the game going so long to where they lose to not having really any resources. Anyways, getting into the actual deck, it is 40 cards. Most of my decks are exactly 40 cards. Starting off, the triple Giant Soldier of Stone. This guy is the best wall stat-wise in the deck with 1,300 attack and 2,000 defense. Of course, you're going to play 3 of this. This is like one of the only walls other than the Wall of Illusion that you're going to want to definitely play at 3. Aquamador, it's 100 less attack than Giant Soldier Stone, so it's not as good attack-wise, and then it has 2,000 defense. The triple Spirit of the Harp, this is another wall, 800 attack and 2,000 defense. And then finally, the last wall, or the last non-effect wall in the deck, the 3 magic or mystical elf. Again, it has the same stat lineup as the Spirit of Heart does, so 800 attack, 2k defense. And then the best monster of the deck, in my opinion, and the best wall as well, the Wall of Illusion. It might not have like the best stats. It only has 1,000 attack and it only has 1,850 defense. But the reason it shines is because of its effect. Whenever an opponent's monster attacks into it, it returns the monster to the hand, which is, like, it's insane. They have to bait. The only way of them really getting over this by normal monster and no spell or trap involvement would be like one of the tribute summon monsters like Summon Skull, Curse of Dragon, Judge Man, or Blue Eyes. Be like the only way. And even then, they're negging cards to just get this thing off the board. So it's very, very good. And that's one of the reasons why I think this is the best monster in the deck. The triple Man-Eater Bug, flip effect monster, and then destroy a monster on the field. This is, of course, self-explanatory. It's one of the best cards in this format. The double Hane, I've really been enjoying playing this guy. Used to, I didn't even play this guy. When I first started playing this format, and before I even uploaded my deck to YouTube, I used to not even play this guy in any of my format decks, but now this guy is starting to become a common occurrence in this format for me. He has a lot of cool interactions. If you don't know, his flip effect is return a monster to hand, but it doesn't even have to be like your opponent's monster. He has cool interactions with flip effects like Man-Eater Bug, where if you've got like the bug set, you can flip up the bug and then destroy a monster and then flip up your Hane and return the bug to hand. And the great thing about this is your opponent won't know if you're resetting the bug or if you're setting one of your big walls. So your opponent won't know, like, is that another bug or am I getting bluffed or something? So that's the great thing about this card in this deck, is you can play some mind games with your opponent with it. And of course, he was the last monster of the deck. So now on to the spell cards. Starting off, the powerful Power 5. Of course, you're going to play this in every Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck or May 2002 format deck. The Raigeki Dark Hole for the monster removal, Change of Heart for taking an opponent's monster, and then Monster Reborn for bringing something back. The Pot of Greed lets you draw 2. The Change of Heart is probably the worst one in this deck of this group, or Monster Reborn, just because you're not really getting aggro with the deck until late game. So mainly this is used for like fissure plays in this deck, where you would take control of an opponent's weaker monster and then fissure their bigger monster, since the bigger monster is the only thing left. That's mainly what I use this for. And then Monster Reborn I use for bringing back one of their big beaters to window their field down and, of course, open up a play to attack in. Another thing I forgot to mention, too, was Hane and Change of Heart is also pretty good, because you can flip up the Hane, return something to their hand. You can take control of something and then swing in that way. Hane could also work with Fissure, where you return something to their hand and then you fissure the bigger thing that's left. So they can also play together that way too. And of course, you guys know what the next card is going to be. The triple Fissure. It's just monster removal. it's not, again, this card isn't as good in this deck as it is in aggro decks of the format, because there's really nothing you're hitting. This is mainly just to hit like problematic cards, like I say, the bigger monsters, and you can hit them by using Change of Heart and Hain to open up to where that bigger monster is the only thing left. The Double Swords of Revealing Light. Again, this card was at 2 in this format, or else you would be playing 3, which sucks because I wish you could play 3 of this card. It would be very fun. And then finally, of the spell cards, the Double Card Destruction. This is another one of your win cons in the deck. You basically activate this when your opponent has 4 or 5 cards in their hand, and it doesn't have to be that much. As long as your opponent has more cards in their hand, I would say at least 3, because Pot of Greed's a thing. So at least 3 or more cards in their hand, you can play this, and then they're going to probably lose to deck out if they can't deal with your field. Onto the trap cards. The Triple Waboku. It's a staple in this format. Most of the stuff is like staple in this format because it was a very small card pool. But the Triple Waboku for stalling out. Cool thing with Waboku, you can do it with the Hain, and you can do it with the Maneater Bug, or really any flip effect monster. It works best with Wall, though, is when your opponent attacks into one of these, you can Waboku, so their monster gets returned to the hand, the Hain lives. So, of course, it's not as good with Hain. The Maneater Bug, they attack into it, you Waboku, they lose the monster, and Maneater Bug lives. But again, it's not as good. The main thing you're going to want to do this with is, of course, the Wall, because they attack into the Wall, and Wall is definitely going to be living because of its high defense. So they basically just lose a turn pretty much off of that alone, and then they've got to go next turn and try and figure out how to deal with the Wall. Where something like a Hain, a Maneater Bug with weak defense, they can deal with like almost immediately next turn. Onto the Triple Trap Hole. This is a very good card. Again, in my opinion, it's the best trap of this format. But in this deck particular, there's a trap that I'd argue that's better than it. But you still want to play this. I would mainly use this on their Tribute Summon monsters. I wouldn't really use... Normally, you would use this on something like a Lajin, something very big. But in this deck, Lajin isn't a threat. I would use this on the Tribute Summon monsters. Or if they're playing the Blue Eyes variant, a Lord of D would be very good. Because you don't want to get fluted and then they have 2 Blue Eyes. Because unless you got one of your Power 5s... it's not going to be looking very good for you if that happens. So I would mainly only use this for like Lord of D's. That's the only level 4 or lower monster I would use this on in this format. Wicked Worm Beast would be another one, just because that card is annoying. But again, Wicked Worm Beast isn't really a threat either. The Ultimate Offering, or not just Ultimate Offering. This is the card that I said in this deck might be a bit better than what Trap Hole is. But I wouldn't really go like crazy with this card early on in the duel, because your opponent will have a lot of their resources. Like Fissure will still be up. They'll have, of course, like their Change of Heart still early on, so they can take control of the Wall and tribute over it. And of course, the big threat would be Geki and then the Dark Hole. So I would wait until one of their Power 5s have been used up, or most of their Power 5s have been used up, and like most of their Fissures have been used up before going off with this card. Because once it gets to the point where your opponent doesn't really have anything left to deal with your board presence, that's when this card opens up and becomes insane. But anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed the deck profile. This is one of my more favorite decks in the format, because you guys know that I love the Stally and cheesy troll decks. The cool thing about this deck is you can get a little techie with it. You can run a beatdown variant, run less of the walls, and then you can put in like Summon Skull and Lajin. Another thing that you can do is run less of the walls, and then you can run a burn engine, so you can put like Just Desserts in here with Final Flame and Ukazi. That's also pretty fun to do. Or you could just take my route and just use the deck as just a big beater, or not a big beater, just use the deck as like a big wall and big like Stally deck. Anyways, I will have more of this format coming. I am also working on other formats that hopefully should be done soon, but definitely be looking forward to more of these. I will be bringing more of this format because I love this format. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. This has been the Only Big Green Yu-Gi-Oh, and I'm signing out.